The Colorado Buffaloes. They're playing against someone who aren't wearing black and gold on Thursday, and it's going to be a great game.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through to September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to like, subscribe, and follow because football season is here. And so is Scott Procter. He's going to be here every Tuesday this season as we dive into what happens, what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between. So Scott, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, my boy. It's a blast always chopping it up with you, man. It's finally here, man. It's finally game week. It's finally a game being played this week, man. I'm excited to hop into it and, see these Buffs finally take the field in 2024.
Take the field against someone who's not themselves, right? It feels like I've seen like 1,000 well-off media videos of them just going up against each other. I'm like, oh, it's great. We don't get to see that kind of coverage, but I need to see a different uniform color and not Travis Hunter's gray jersey. Okay, Scott, you were at the post-media session today on Monday, but we're going to talk about it on Tuesday. And we're going to talk about what were your big observations. So you heard from Pat Shurmur, you heard from Robert Livingston, and they talked about personnel. They talked about the vibe. So let's start with Robert Livingston. Obviously, I think if it's not already, most attention should be on him, right? This Thursday is kind of like a litmus test for him. First game he's ever coordinated. He's got a brand new defensive unit to figure out, and he has a lot of talent on this unit, I would say. So what are things that he said that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that stood out to me out the gate is just when he was asked about, kind of defensive leaders, guys that he's really kind of, taken a liking to, again, kind of more than what they do on the field, but kind of the leader that they are, in their respective position groups and whatnot. And he highlighted three guys, three guys we've all heard of, three guys who played for the Buffs last year. We'll start from the front. Shane Copes, defensive line, is somebody that he mentioned. And I think that's another sign to me that we should expect Shane Copes to start, at the interior defensive line, on Thursday alongside Chidozie Nwonkwu, the Houston transfer. Again, Shane played quite a bit last year. He obviously is loved by that coaching staff, by that locker room. He's a vocal leader. So again, I think, those comments, in addition to what we've seen so far this spring, throughout the fall and throughout, summer camp and whatnot, that it looks like Shane is at least going to get the first lick, to start at interior defensive line again, next to the block bully Chidozie. So that'll be interesting to watch. There'll be a handful of guys being rotated, at that defensive line, but it looks like those two guys will start. He also mentioned Trevor Woods, who we've obviously, talked quite a bit about. I believe he should start at inside linebacker next to Mekhi Green. Coach Livingston just talked about, his development, being the lead on that second level with the defense. His transition from safety to linebacker is impressive. And the last guy he mentioned was Cameron Silman Craig, another, slept on, in my opinion, defender, mostly because he's a bit undersized, but again, a leader, somebody who that entire coaching staff, that entire defense trusts. And he was a playmaker last year, a handful of, I think he tied for the team lead with Travis in interceptions last year. So he's in for another big season. And obviously, he has some high expectations, at least coming from Coach Livingston, amongst others. So just talk about that. Cameron's just a phenomenal kid, a phenomenal, person in addition to being a talented football player. So those three things in particular, stood out from, Coach Livingston. He just talked also about, you mentioned he's a first-time play caller. This is his first opportunity to, call a defense, run a defense after 7-8+ years in the NFL with the Cincinnati Bengals as their secondaries coach. And he was just talking about he's grateful for this opportunity, man. He said he would run through a wall for Coach Prime, man. Right. He realizes that Coach Prime, took a chance on him. Again, this is somebody, very contrasting styles from last year's defensive coordinator, Charles Kelly, an older veteran, kind of guy who's been around a lot of college football programs. And obviously Livingston is younger, been in the NFL game for the last, damn near decade. So it's going to be interesting. But I really like, Livingston just impresses me every time I hear him talking. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's a future head coach one day, whether it be at the college or the NFL ranks. And I think this year is a year where a lot of people are going to wake up and start to recognize the name Robert Livingston.
He just seems like such a low-key guy, too. Like, I feel like if you were to pass Robert Livingston at the grocery store, I don't know if I'd be like, Robert? Like, he just seems so
Right.
chill, like, just so calm, and, yeah, I wanted to, point out, we were kind of a little wrong, Scott. We did our depth chart projections a while ago, and I think the 3 guys that he talked about today, maybe not Cameron Simmons-Craig, I think we were both high on him, but
Mhm.
the other 2, I think Shane Cokes and then, not Chidozie. We knew Chidozie was gonna start, but we thought Shane Cokes was kind of on upset alert, right? We thought like a guy like Anquin Barnes or maybe someone else would come in and Torian Carter and take that starting spot. And it's interesting to see that he's hung on to that spot as someone who one transferred from Ivy, which they're not known for producing like Power Five juggernaut players, and two, Coach
Yeah,
Prime brought in a bunch of new guys. And while it wasn't with the sole purpose of replacing the guys from last year, it was to push them, right? And so
for
to see
sure.
Shane Coke still holding on to that starting spot, what does that tell us about him?
Yeah, I mean, it tells them that they trust him. And I just had to look back. My depth chart actually that I published in May, I actually did have Shane and
Okay,
Chidozie projected as 2 interior defensive
there we
linemen.
go.
I mean, again, and Cokes, he wore an L on his jersey last
Right.
season, which obviously designates him as a team leader, from Coach Prime and his staff. He played in all 12 games last year.
Right, yeah.
Nine of those were starts. So obviously he's played a lot of football under Coach Prime and most of that defensive staff that returns from last year. So again,
Mhm.
he's trustworthy. He's a vocal leader, and obviously even Coach Livingston, who wasn't here last year, has quickly built a rapport with him enough to at least mention him in the same conversation as Cameron and Trevor Wood as leader. So I think a lot of people, I see some comments sometimes like, why is Shane Coke starting? Like, he didn't really do much last year, but I think that has a lot to do with what was around him. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of those guys aren't there. I feel like when Shane Coke is surrounded by Chidozie, some better pass rushers, edge rushers, some better guys at that second level, Nikhai Hill-Green at the linebacker spot, I think it's going to improve his game a lot. And again, a week 1 depth chart isn't going to be the week 10 depth chart, and it
Right.
shouldn't be.
There's probably going to be at least 6 guys that are not starting by week 7.
Exactly. That's how it goes. So we shouldn't put too much stock in, who's starting at interior defensive line week 1. It'll work itself out, and people will see, who really belongs to start and, get the majority of reps and whatnot on the field.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify. We talked about him possibly. That's what it was. We talked about him possibly being someone who could lose their starting spot, not the certified depth chart. That's my bad. But Trevor Woods, nice to see him still holding on. I think, despite all of the sort of, I won't say hate, but he does get a little flack from the fan base because they're not the biggest Trevor Woods fans. But he's a playmaker, right? We saw him. It was the interception against TCU. That was a game sealing or sort of game clinching interception, if you will. He just makes big plays, and it's kind of like in baseball. Our coaches always said, if you hit, you will be on the field. In football, if you make big plays, you will be on the field. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a starter or a rotational guy. And Trevor Woods, he gained a lot of weight, and good weight. Let's not make it seem like he's like hefty now, but he gained a lot of healthy weight where he'll be able to sort of be in the trenches and help in the run game. And I think it really adds an element to this linebacker unit, which we were a little concerned about, right? So they have Nikhai Hill-Green, they have Trevor Woods, and now you have a guy like Levante Bentley who started quite a few games for them last year, and he's kind of a rotational guy, right? And so obviously not everything's set in stone, but that linebacker group's looking really good. And then Chidozie, I think after people learned his nickname was the block bully, I think we could have just wrote his name in Sharpie on the depth chart because he just claimed that starting spot. It seemed like from the jump. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Chidozie is going to be a big reason why this Colorado defense improves in stopping the run. Again, he's not going to give you, a ton of sacks or be somebody who's constantly, sacking the quarterback, but he's going to be so impactful to how much improved, this defense is going to be at stop and run, which is a big problem last year, right? They're bottom 3 or 4 in the Pac-12 in terms of, allowing opponents to run the football on them. And that has to be addressed. And that starts up front, right? That starts up front with guys like him, Shane Cokes, some of the edge guys. And again, the second level has to work in tandem, with the guys up front. So I think Chidozie is, that's exactly what the Bucs needed. I wrote about it as soon as he committed from Houston over to Colorado. That might not get talked about. It's not a sexy position, interior defensive line, but it's impactful, and that influences, wins and losses for sure. And then, also on Trevor too, his versatility is, I think, what makes him, a starting linebacker on this team, a true 3-down linebacker. You mentioned, his him putting on some weight. He's up to 224 pounds now. He was lifted at like 205, I think, as of earlier this year in the spring. So he obviously put in some serious work. He still looks, the part. And like you mentioned, it's not bad weight. He's not slower by any means because of it. He still has that versatility, the ability to play the pass in addition to the run. So I like where that linebacker group is at. Him and Akai. You bring Levante family, Johnny Chaney Jr., Jalen Wester as well, the FAU transfer, maybe some run situations. Coach Livingston talked today about different packages where you're going to have different packages for different guys to allow them to do what they do best on the field. So I think we're going to see that rear its head with Trevor and some of those other linebackers as they get rotated in and out.
Yeah, the defense is exciting this year. I think when you rank at or near the bottom in every statistical category, the only way to go, there's only one way to go, and that's up. There's also a really intriguing offensive aspect to this, and Pat Shurmur was another speaker today. I talked about it on yesterday's episode, Scott. It's a weird situation last year because, one, there was the whole Sean Lewis thing. He went from like the front runner of being the Michigan State head coach to all of a sudden he's getting demoted. And Pat Shurmur comes in, and I don't really know if we got a full dose of Pat Shurmur. I think we got a little dose of Shurmur calling Sean Lewis's offense, which we knew with that group was not working just based off how poor the offensive line was. So one thing that stood out to me that he said today was that they're like worlds ahead of where they were last year, I believe is how he phrased it. So talk to me about Shurmur's press availability today.
Yeah, I mean, that's something he talked about too, is because, and again, you would think that he's more comfortable. It was his first year on campus last year. He was in the analyst role to start the season. He's really just kind of running what Sean Lewis, likes to do, as an offensive coordinator. And then when you take over his offense with 3 or 4 games left in the season, you can't change much. You can't just say, what, we're doing things my way now. We're doing this way now. You just can't really do that in the midst of the season. There's been a whole months, 4, 5, 6 months of installs and and whatnot. So I think, Shurmur is more confident in this group. And I think, the players out there, Shedeur included, are more confident in, the guy calling the plays now and being Pat Shurmur. Shurmur talked a little bit about that today, just his relationship, his rapport with Shedeur, and just how Shedeur makes things easy on him because he's always prepared. He always knows, what to be looking for, in terms of, week 1 versus NDSU, for example, in terms of tendencies, what to look out for, down and distance situations like that, third down, red zone. So I think, Pat Shurmur, again, we know he comes from an NFL background, and Shedeur has an NFL mind. So that goes hand in hand, and I think that's going to, pay very big dividends this season. Shurmur also talked about, his confidence level with the offensive line, which I thought was interesting. He mentioned, that the 5 guys, the 5 starters that he expects, which we expect to be, from left to right, Jordan Seaton, Justin Mayers, Hank Zelinskis, Tyler Brown most likely, and obviously Khalil Benson on the right side. He said those 5 guys have got a lot of time on task. Thankfully, knock on wood, haven't really had to deal with injuries, which, has limited the amount of time away from the practice field, getting reps together. So sounds like Shurmur sounds really good with the starting 5. Coach Lodenholt, the offensive line coach, said last week they feel really good about 6 to 8 guys up front. So it seems like there's some real optimism, with those guys up front, which is going to be big. Running the football, opening lanes for those running backs, and obviously protecting the commodity that is, Shedeur Sanders. That's going to be of utmost importance.
Got to protect him. And so it's interesting, the offensive line, there was a little Tyler Brown noise recently where he was a starting right tackle. It's interesting to see that they're confident 6 to 8, because last year I think they were confident in about 0 to 2. Realistically, Tyler Brown is someone that could go in anywhere, plug and play, which is a really, really great weapon to have. And also, is Charlie Offerdahl the starting running back? Are we expecting Charlie O to take that first snap next week, or on Thursday, not next week?
Yeah, I mean, I am. I fully am. It's been nothing. We really haven't seen or heard anything that should make us think otherwise. Charlie Offerdahl from the spring, through the spring, throughout fall camp, has been kind of that first guy. He took the first rep at last week's open practice, had the first carry in inside zone. The second play was a play action fake to him, getting the ball out to Terrell Timmons. So he's going to be involved early.
Time to shine.
Exactly. It's kind of similar to Shane Cokes, not exactly, but it's like you're going to get the opportunity week 1 to show us what you got. You've earned it up until this point to, us to allow you the opportunity to start for us week 1. Show us that we're right, So I think that's going to be a situation with Charlie to start. And I think he's more than capable. I think week 1, honestly, I think is going to be a good opportunity for him to wake up, people who might just still be putting him in the walk-on box, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a big opportunity for him to show that, he really liked that. He's not just a walk-on guy. Coach Prime isn't just, hyping me up just because, I got a cool mustache. No, I can really play, you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
I think, again, Charlie's going to get the first crack. I think Dallin Hayden is a guy, though, who eventually kind of takes control of this backfield, the Ohio State transfer. He's just a really gifted, talented runner. Ohio State coach Ryan Day said, during the middle, last fall, that Dallin was just best with the ball in his hands. That's when he's at his best. That's when he shines the most. He's a shifty guy, but he's also a powerful runner. He had a real powerful finish to a run at last week's open practice, taking a couple guys with him. He doesn't seem like the type of guy who's going to go down by just one tackler. It's going to take a gang, a group of guys to bring him down. And I think he brings the physicality as well as the explosiveness that this offense is going to need at their running back spot. You can't, count out Isaiah Augusta, the Arkansas transfer either. You can't count out a couple of true freshmen, Michael Welch, Brandon Hood. I think they'll, by season's end, get a crack, at least at some point, at getting into that rotation. But yeah, the start is going to be Charlie O, Dallin probably, but it's going to be interesting. They're going to get a chance to showcase their talents for sure on national television,
right,
on ESPN with the whole country watching.
Yeah, and who do they play this week? Remind me.
I think the Bison. I think that's what
Bison, right? Some program, North Dakota State, which Scott actually has a unique connection with, and we're going to talk about everything that he learned with his conversation with his former coach, who's actually on the North Dakota State staff. But first, everyone needs to wake up, and the best way to do that is with 5-Hour Energy. If you're tired after lunch, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit a wall after lunch. Let a 5-Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. 5-Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get 5-Hour Energy product today, you could use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Okay, Scott Procter, the Coloradoan, joining me today to talk about North Dakota State, Colorado. They play in exactly 2 days from when this is dropping, and Colorado's favored by 9.5. North Dakota State, new head coach. They're still going to be a physical team. They still have a talented quarterback who could probably play in the NFL one day. So you talk to your former head coach, which give us a little background on that. Talk about what you guys talked about and what he does now.
I got you. So my college head coach for 3 years. Dan Larson is now the offensive line, the running game coordinator at NDSU. He's been at NDSU the last, 4 or 5 seasons now. He's won a couple of national championships out there already with the Bison. I know, right? I had to do the math when I've been out of college, but damn, yeah. But he left for NDSU, the season right after my senior year of college football. So, I like to think in a way that, I helped him get, that gig at NDSU.
I don't want to say it, but it feels right. It feels like
it feels right. I selfishly like to say that, but no, he's a great mentor of mine. I learned more about football in those 3 years under him than I did, my entire life prior to that. So just a wealth of knowledge, great football mind. And it's easy to see why he was, not only hired, but able to stick on and be successful at NDSU. But yeah, me and Coach Larson, we chopped it up last week. He was kind enough to, chat with me about, this week 1 matchup with Colorado. And I guess a few things, kind of stuck out. You kind of hinted at it there, but, North Dakota State obviously has a new head coach this year, Tim Polisek, coming over from Wyoming, where he was the offensive coordinator for the last few years. And Coach Larson actually pointed this out to me, that this is the first time in 20 plus years that NDSU has actually had an offensive minded head coach. The last 3 to 4 head coaches, again, dating back 20 plus years, have all had defensive backgrounds, have been defensive coordinators, previous to their, tenure as head coach of the Bison. So that's going to be a bit of a philosophy change, but, it's still going to be a physical, fundamentally sound team. And that part of it isn't going to change too much, at least in, Polisek's first year running things. And another thing that probably the biggest thing that stood out to me, and I kind of expected, but it was fascinating to hear, Coach Larson, say it. And kind of talk through it. But, with all the new pieces, with all the new transfer additions that this Colorado defense has, it's got to be a nightmare trying to prepare for this team, particularly week one where they don't have any film, on tape as a unit, so that was, kind of the Coach Larson said it's super challenging, prepping for this team because, again, you don't have film on them as a full unit. You don't really even know what defensive coordinator Robert Livingston is going to do. And that's something else Larson mentioned that, Livingston's going to have a lot of intricacies coming from, the NFL, working with Lou Anarumo that, Larson and that Bison offense is going to have to work through and make adjustments to. And that's why halftime adjustments, assuming it's a close game still at that point, is going to be crucial because, neither team is going to have a great read on what the other is going to do, with it being week one, and, in the era of the transfer portal, there's so many new moving parts. But by halftime, I think both teams are going to have a good idea of what's working, what's not working, what we need to adjust. So that's going to be something to watch. And again, that should be something that should work in Livingston's, favor. Having coming from the NFL background, they're used to making real, halftime adjustments where you're like, okay, scrap what we did in that first half, that second quarter, we're not doing it anymore. It's not working. This is what we're going to have to do. This is what we're going to have to rely on. Remember this install from day 2 of fall camp. We're going to run that, for the second half. So it's going to be crucial. And, Coach Larson flat out said that we don't even really know who Colorado starters are, defensively, which is, again, that's a huge advantage for CU from a preparation standpoint, from a game plan standpoint. So I encourage everybody out there to go check that out. I believe it's, entitled NDSU Coach Finds Preparing for Colorado to Be Super Challenging, written by a boy, Scott Procter, at the Coloradoan.com. Go check that out.
I'll put the link in the comments below so that way we can all find it and go over that. Because it was a really great breakdown between Scott and his former head coach. Kind of like not a weird interaction, but it's like unique because you guys both went separate directions and you come back and it's like, okay, here we are again. So it's really cool to see you cross paths again with your former coach. There's a couple things that I've done some NDSU research as much as I could, right? It's a unique situation where the FCS isn't covered as heavily as the Power 4 is, but there's still some interesting nuggets out there. And so one thing in particular that stood out to me that I saw today was actually, and I'm going to have one of the North Dakota State reporters on my show this week. They have their interior offensive line very young. I think it's 2 or 3 redshirt freshmen, and that is something where Colorado could take advantage of. I talked about it, and it was kind of inspired by your article, and I said that on my show the other day. Colorado has this element of surprise for the first few games where it's like you don't know who our stars are going to be. You don't know what the offense is going to be. You can look at what Shurmur did in the NFL, but again, NFL game is a different game. Robert Livingston, he's about as big as a wild card as it gets. We knew Charles Kelly, to an extent, was going to run a Nick Saban style defense because that's ingrained in him. He's from the Nick Saban tree. Robert Livingston is like, I mean, you could throw me and Scott out there, and you'd probably have a better time guessing what we're going to do than what he's going to do because he has so much knowledge where he'll probably throw out a nice little shell where it's like, oh, they're going to do cover 2 on this play or whatever. And it's like, actually, no, we're not. And they're just going to like mix around. I expect a lot of movement from the defense. Would you agree, Scott?
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be, that's why you bring in a Robert Livingston, right? To be multiple and to give your defense different looks and not allow the opposing quarterback to ever feel comfortable in terms of the picture that he's seeing out there on the field. And that's why I think the Livingston hire, it remains to be seen. But to me, at this point, it seems like a home run hire, especially when you're trying to build an NFL culture in that locker room, in that building amongst the coaching staff. I mean, Livingston, it's like you're getting, all the, NFL information and whatnot, but it's coming in somebody who, might not be the biggest name, somebody who can really grow, with his team, with a lot of those young guys on that defense. So I think Livingston is a true wild card in a great sense to where it's like, I think I mentioned either on your show or maybe another one, but it's like, I think it's certainly on the table that at the end of the season, we're like, Livingston is a star. That's a coaching star, like somebody who is going to be a future head coach, one day, again, whether it be in college football or back in the NFL ring. So I think there's a young star kind of, in Coach Livingston as a defensive mind. And that can only benefit what they got going on from the talent-wise on that side of the ball.
Yeah, there's something to be said about him hanging around in the NFL for like a decade, right? There's been coaching changes, there's been this, there's been that, and he's been there. He's been a constant. So for him to have a full-on opportunity to run the show, I think will be interesting. But yeah, Colorado's defensive line, more experience. Colorado's offense, I think it's more explosive than most offenses in the country, but I also think based on what Scott's telling us, North Dakota State's offense isn't going to be the same where it's like they're going to run the ball down your throat 75 times. Like they might get a little spread on us. They might try to throw the ball around, sling the ball around the yard, because Wyoming last year, if you guys remember, I think it was Texas, they played them close. Now, obviously, their defense had a big part in that, but Wyoming's offense it was a slow offensive game, but they were matching Texas for the longest time. So what do you say about that? What do you think their offense is going to look like? What was your offense like?
Honestly, yeah, like, and that's interesting too. Like Coach Larson, I was a bit of a dual threat quarterback. I like to use my leg just because I wasn't, that good of a thrower, accurate thrower, but it's kind of the same thing, and that's the same thing that Larson liked to run at my school, UWEC. A lot of quarterback run, a lot of quarterback power. That's what you should expect to see Thursday night, because their starting quarterback Cam Miller, ran for quite a bit of yards last year. And Coach Larson actually mentioned, to me at one point, when talking about Cam, 2 years ago, NDSU won an FCS semifinal game to go to the national championship game. And Cam Miller started the whole game, played the whole game, completed one pass. But he ran for over 100 yards. It was a close game. And, Larson just talked about that. That happens sometimes. There was a couple drops, there were a couple overthrows, but there was just no confidence in the passing game that day. But Cam Miller is able to get it out the mud, use his legs in some design runs, some scramble situations, and give his offense enough of a lift to advance to the national championship game. So that's what I would expect to see. I would expect to see Cam Miller and even their other quarterback. Probably expect to see a bit of a 2-quarterback system. They got another powerful, running quarterback who we may see in the red zone, goal line situation. So I think if, Livingston and this Colorado defense can just not allow the quarterback run game to be a significant part of, how NDSU moves the ball, make Cam Miller throw the football, make them prove that they have a legitimate passing offense, because again, they also lost arguably their best receiver, a really explosive guy, Eli Green, to the transfer portal, who's now at Iowa State, now here in the Big 12. So make NDSU prove to you that they can throw the football, that they trust their guys on the perimeter. And if that's the case, I also still feel like Colorado feels pretty good, because if that ball's in the air with Travis Hunter, DJ McKinney, Preston Hodge around, I think, the Buffs coaching staffs like their chances in that scenario.
Yeah, you got to slow down Cam Miller in the run game, because it's not exclusive to Cam Miller. Any quarterback that can run hurts your defense, because it just adds one extra element. And so I wanted to kind of give a little background stat on him before we moved on. Scott brought up the one completion game. He was 1 for 12 for 5 yards, but he did run for 132 yards. So he does a little bit of everything. This past year, he threw for 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, 4 picks. And then he also added an impressive 645 yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. So he gets it done on the ground. And don't be surprised if they try to run all over Colorado with him or without him, and figure it out as they go, because that's kind of every team's secret weapon is when they have a mobile quarterback. When we come back, we're going to be talking about our predictions for this upcoming game. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Hey, Locked On Buffs fans, I want you to take a moment to give you a heads up about a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college program to glory. Can you imagine being the head coach of Colorado? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling the offensive plays during the games. So if everything goes right, it's on you. If everything goes wrong, also on you. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Buffs fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game today, just visit ultimate-cfb.com and look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. We are back for our final segment of Scott's Tuesdays, or shooting the you-know-what with Scott. We're going to find the perfect name for it. It's going to have an awesome little segment name, but let's talk about Colorado, North Dakota State. I gave the details on yesterday's episode, but for those who aren't familiar, it's in Boulder. 87 degrees is the projected weather. Nice, sunny with cloudy day. North Dakota State, they're a mountainous sort of school, so I don't think there's going to be any altitude advantages or weather advantages that really stand out. Colorado is favored by 9.5. The over-under is at 59.5, according to ESPN. And then ESPN's matchup predictor gives them a 71% chance of winning. So, Scott, obviously, we're not going to be giving any gambling advice because we're not gambling advisors, but we're going to talk about what we think is going to happen. Do you think Colorado wins this game close by double digits, or they blow them out, or it's a close one? What do you think?
Yeah, I would expect Colorado to win this game pretty comfortably by the end of the day. I would be shocked if North Dakota State covered the spread. I'd be shocked if this was a single-digit game, when the clock hit zeros. I think I've put out a prediction probably about a month or two ago of Colorado winning 38-17. Okay. I still feel pretty good about that prediction. I think, offensively, Colorado is going to have their way, whether it be throwing the football with Shador to the stable of talented pass catchers or, really, letting their wings fly with that running game and showing that they're capable of, having that part of their offense be effective, whether it be Charlie, Dallin, some of the other young running backs in that room. So, and then defensively, again, I think if plan we talked about, if that gets executed, if they turn Cam Miller into a passing quarterback and get them in a third and longs, second and longs, unfavorable down distances from an offensive perspective, I think, I think they're going to cause some turnovers too. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Travis gets one or one of those other, talented defensive backs get their hands on one, late in the game when, NDSU behind and, trying to, put on a furious comeback. So again, I expect about a 3-score football game. Again, okay. You never know what can happen. Talent discrepancy is obviously pretty sizable, but NDSU has a winning culture. They have a lot of talent as well to go along with that culture as well. They're not going to be afraid of coming into this environment in Boulder and playing on national television against an opponent that's talked about as much as anybody in college football. They're going to relish that opportunity. They know the opportunity that's in front of them because everybody going to be rooting for NDSU on Thursday night. I'll tell you that much. I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't already know, but the whole country is going to be behind NDSU. And, they just want to feed off that energy as well. So I think it's going to be imperative that Colorado gets off to a strong, fast start, not allow NDSU to hang around, because if this game gets, late into the third quarter, it's still a, one-score game or a 10, 13-point game. I think there might be some sweaty palms, but I don't expect it to go that way. I think NDSU might hang around for about a quarter and a half maybe, but I think right before halftime, Colorado's, talent level, I think will rear its head.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty close with you on that. I think Colorado's going to win. I do think Colorado's going to cover, but I think it's going to be like a 12 to 13 point victory. I'm just going based off of what I've seen from week 0, which obviously doesn't really apply to this entirely, but the favorites were kind of slow to start. Yeah. Obviously, Florida State kind of got off to a rough start. Delaware State they covered, I believe, but they were down by, I think they tied the game in the second quarter against Hawaii, and Hawaii was a heavy favorite. Montana State obviously beat New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of
big weekend for the Dogs, week 0.
Right.
Big weekend for the Dogs.
I think Colorado wins, but I do think it's going to be an uncomfortable win where it's going to be like that. Like I can already see Coach Prime after the game making a joke saying, yeah, that's why I don't want to play them. Because I don't know if you guys remember at Big 12 Media Days, he was like, I'm mad at Rick for scheduling them. And so I think that's going to come to fruition a little bit. I do think Colorado is just way too talented to lose. But before we go, Scott, do you have like a bold prediction for the game? Like I think I have one. I think we're going to get a freshman touchdown in one way or another. I think it's going to be Draylon Miller or Michael Welch.
Happy birthday to Draylon Miller. It's his birthday here today on Monday. Shout out to him. I think, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think I'm not going to take full credit for this because I think somebody asked me it if I think it would happen. And I'm like, you know what? I can definitely see that happen. Okay. I think we get a 100-yard rusher and a 100-yard receiver out there.
Ooh, I like that. Okay. So you heard it here first. We both think Colorado's going to win. It's not going to be a blowout in the sense of like Colorado's probably not going to beat them by 50. Like that. I don't think either of us would agree that happened unless it does. And then we'll look like total fools, but we got all of season to look like fools, Scott. So that's the fun of this. But make sure to tune in to Locked On Buffs and make sure to go follow Scott Procter and I'll have his article linked below. He's going to have a bunch of great coverage. Scott, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next Tuesday.
I'll see y'all next Tuesday. Let's get it.